This is the Dell Ultrasharp 34-inch monitor. Now, I don't have everything that this includes here on the video, but in addition to the monitor, of course, it comes with a stand, which you can see there below, an HDMI cable, a cable cover for the back. I'll show that in a minute. A power cord, DP cable, which is a mini DP to DP cable, USB 3.0 upstream cable, a CD with drivers, and the quick setup guide. Now, the first thing to note about this monitor, there is no detailed printed instructions other than the quick start guide, as you either have to refer online or look at the guide on the CD to get detailed instructions. Now, I do think, that the power cord for this is also a bit short. I wish it was a couple feet longer than it is. And I do think the instructions could be better written, both the online guide and the quick setup guide, especially when it comes to the kind of unique setup that I have for this particular monitor. Now, I have two laptops. I have a small 13-inch and a little bit larger monitor or laptop there, that instead of going for like a dual monitor setup, I wanted one big monitor that I could use both laptops with via picture-in-picture or just separate source. And one of the main reasons I went with this large monitor in addition is because this one laptop is a small 13-inch portable laptop, which is great for travel, and it's a work laptop. It's great for that purpose at the office, but the small screen's not so good for home office use, and to me created eye strain. So, since we do a lot of work, with spreadsheets and PowerPoints and various documents and things like that, the small screen for the laptop there is a bit of an annoyance. So this makes this much easier to work on. Now, like I said, I mainly decided to go with this because of the picture-in-picture feature that this has, to be able to switch between the different sources that this monitor has the ability to do. The monitor is pretty easy to connect to the stand. It really just snaps in place here, and it holds it pretty well. It doesn't wobble that much. It's no worse than any other type of monitor stand that I've seen. Now, this does have the ability to, if you want, to connect another stand, a different type of stand if you want. But I'm fine with this particular stand, as it has the ability to swivel and tilt and things like that. As you can see, it swivels and tilts and all that kind of stuff. So I'm fine with the stand as it is. But as I've mentioned before, the instructions themselves, especially when it comes to some of the setup stuff, particularly, is not particularly well written and could be a little bit better, especially when you're dealing with the dual PC setup and setting up the keyboard and mouse to work on two computers. Now, one of my complaints here about this monitor is, as you can see, the ports here, there's plenty of them, but they're down-facing ports, and they're a bit difficult to deal with in terms of plugging things in. And one of the things that I've noticed is that this plate cover here, cable cover that goes on here, has a tendency when you put it on, if you're not careful, to pull the cords back out of the ports. So I don't really like that. I wish they were back-facing. They have one USB port over here that's a back-facing port, but all the rest of them are down ports, and again, make it a bit of a pain to deal with plugging the cables in. I like the fact that it has plenty of cables, or plenty of ports, especially USB ports. There's several of those, upstream and downstream ports. But my one issue I do have is this particular monitor only has one HDMI port. I'm not sure why they only went with one port. Instead, they have that DP port. I would have much preferred a monitor of this size to have two HDMI ports. For my setup, because of the fact that I only have one laptop that has the DP our mini DP connection. I connected one here, one of the laptop through the DP port, and the other laptop which doesn't, I connected via an HDMI cable because it doesn't have a mini DP port at all. Now both computers here are running Windows 10. The monitor was recognized by both computers right away. Now the CD has drivers, and I installed the drivers anyway in the Dell configuration software, thinking that I might need it for something, but I really couldn't tell much difference between the drivers and the Dell configuration stuff than what standard Windows 10 does. The initial setup for this is a bit quirky to me, especially when it comes to the mini port setup. It sometimes goes blank for no reason, and I have to either unplug it or power down the laptop to get it to come back. I don't know why that is. It just seems a little quirky as opposed to what HDMI. I'm not familiar with the mini DP ports. This is the first time I've ever used that type of connection. So, but it seems like, you know, a little bit more quirky than what an HDMI, and that's another reason I wish there was an HDMI connection on this. The monitor here has 4 touch buttons that really don't light up other than the power button here, and they kind of show you on screen, on a small screen here, what the features do, and they do change. I found the menu to be a bit cumbersome for certain things, especially when you're trying to access and switch, because of the fact I use 2 laptops. I like being able to switch sources, and I found that the menu is a bit cumbersome, especially you have to do several button pushes to switch to the different sources. Like, for example, in this case, I want to go from DP, which is where it currently is, to HDMI. You know, it's instead of being a one-touch kind of switch, you know, it goes to, you know, it takes several button pushes. Also, the same thing with, for example, when I want to do picture-in-picture, it takes several button pushes as well that make it a bit more cumbersome than what it really should be to enable that mode. I really think this should be a bit simpler to use in that respect, because it's too many button pushes in that regard. And I'm going to hopefully get the picture-in-picture to come up. See, and then here's another issue that I run into. Sometimes the picture-in-picture has an issue for whatever reason. I don't know why, but sometimes it's a bit quirky in getting it to work. So after playing around with this again, one thing I've kind of sort of figured out is the menu, the quirkiness of the monitor. If it doesn't detect properly, you have to kind of go out and switch the source setting and switch it back to MDP to get it to go back. So in this case, now this is the side-by-side view of both computers. This is the work laptop. This is the personal laptop here. One, again, running through the mini display port, the other one running through HDMI. So as I mentioned here before, the awkwardness of this menu display here, you know, it's several button pushes to go to the picture-in-picture, and in this case there's 3 options here. I go with the picture-in-picture full because I want 2 full screens. Now with the picture-in-picture, it does make the screens themselves look a little bit stretched out, as opposed to what they would normally look like. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but it does give them a bit of a stretched look. Now, the other thing with this is this has the ability to switch between one set of USB devices, like a keyboard and mouse, for example, for both devices. Now, I played around with this, and there's a toggle switch right there, and of course it just went off when I put my finger up there, but there's a toggle switch button here that also I think could be better placed. It makes it a little cumbersome to kind of switch between the devices that you're planning on using. Now, I have an old Microsoft wireless keyboard and mouse, and I tried that with this, and both laptops recognize the keyboard and mouse with no problems. But the problem I had with that particular Microsoft keyboard and mouse is anytime I switched, it seemed to lose its ability to work. I believe it probably has something to do with it being an older keyboard and mouse. But ironically, I tried this old wireless Logitech using the switching feature, and it worked with no issues between both computers. So it must be something quirky with this other particular keyboard and mouse. I'm going to try a new one later on and I'll update my review later on with how that goes to see how the switching works. But again, it falls back to the whole thing where I think that the menus could be streamlined, especially when it comes to switching sources or doing picture-in-picture or switching between keyboard and mouse to different computers. Either streamline the menus where it's not so many button pushes over here, or in the case, maybe a small, simple remote that would allow you to just hit a button to switch between sources and do all those picture-in-picture, kind of like what a TV remote would be, except one simplified just for those specific functions. I think that would make this a bit easier to deal with. And again, like I said, I found that these particular features, I like them, but they are a little quirky in how they work. So, and then of course, cumbersome through the menus as well. Now, but once I got through the awkwardness of the menus, I mean, and again, I have the dual screen set up here, and I'll kind of show, like, sort of how things look. But they're easy, with the dual screen set up, it's pretty easy to read. And of course, with Windows 10, and I'm going to switch back here in a second to the main, just one source. Windows 10 allows you to do a split screen on one laptop as well, so you can do multiple applications via, what the Windows 10 calls, I believe, a snap feature. So that works well, especially for a monitor this size. Once I got past the menu awkwardness of this getting it set up, the screen resolution is pretty, even on the split screen here, and I'm going to switch in just a second here. So I've switched to basically one laptop screen here, full screen, and just to kind of show you an example of just a random Excel spreadsheet that I pulled up that just kind of shows you. It's very easy to read with a spreadsheet. It makes it easy to do some work. In addition to, for example, this is like a graph from the internet with a presentation on it, but it makes it easy to read. Now, in this case, I zoomed the screen resolution to 200% to give the icons a good size and make everything more readable with a screen this large. Now, the one thing I really like with the snap feature on Windows 10, and I'm not a big Windows 10 fan by any means. I actually like Windows 7 better, but the snap feature is really nice, especially with a monitor this size. As you can see, I've got an Excel spreadsheet on this side and a different presentation on the other side of the screen. This is from one laptop, and it's both easy to go back and forth, to work between the two, and do what you need to do in terms of going back and forth between applications and copying, pasting, whatever you need to do. Now, the screen resolution is sharp. The text is beautiful. It's sharp. Regardless of what size you increase it on, and it really, to be honest with you, my laptops don't probably have high-powered graphics card to really push this monitor. I mean, I've just got some basic graphics cards within these laptops, but if you had a high-end graphic card, this would really, exemplify this monitor's ability, because it has a really good resolution. high resolution at 3400, and it's nicer than anything I've used before in terms of monitors over the years. There is a little bit of screen bleed, but that's an issue that most monitors have. I don't think it's a big issue with this monitor. I don't notice it that much, but I've used Asus and Samsung monitors over the years, and this one's no worse than any of those in terms of screen bleed. I don't use this particular monitor for gaming, really. It's just more for work type stuff. But I mean, this really would show off graphics. As long as you had a graphics card that could support the game, this would really work well with this monitor. I mean, short of a 4K, I mean, this is a really good, nice looking screen. I'm actually quite surprised that the monitor has speakers built in. Now, I am a bit surprised that this had speakers, and the speakers actually sound pretty good, considering they're built into the monitor here. But
I've never met a man before.
But I mean, they actually sound pretty good. I mean, they're not going to blow you away. They're a little weak in the bass. I mean, if you really want some great sound, I would suggest, doing a separate speakers. The fact that this monitor has a 3-year warranty from Dell, and that if there's any pixels that go bad, Dell will replace this. I didn't have any issues as far as that so far. The screen's perfect in terms of the pixels. But I do like their warranty. Now, I do think that this monitor is a bit pricey. It's currently $700. It was higher a few months ago. I mean, I still think it's priced a bit high, but it's more reasonably priced than what it was, which I believe it originally came out at about $1,500 about a year ago. The curved screen, which is a little hard to tell looking straight on, but if you look at it at an angle, you can see the curved screen. But sitting in front of it, you really don't notice it, but it does make the edges of the monitor much clearer and easier to see. I mean, again, it's a beautiful monitor, a bit pricey. A beautiful monitor, has a really beautiful screen. It has a lot of useful features. Again, I think some of the features are a bit quirky and a bit more cumbersome to access, especially when it comes to the picture-in-picture and the switching between screens, and the switching of the USB is a little bit more awkward and quirky at times, especially when it comes to using the MDP port than it should be. If they would have included some type of simple remote to allow quick, easy access, or even a separate dedicated button for switching sources or picture-in-picture or that kind of thing, it would make it a lot easier to deal with, I think, than it is. At this price, though, at $700, I think a second HDMI port should have been included. But, this does work fine for a home office, especially if you deal with a lot of spreadsheets and things like that, and things that strain the eyes. This allows to have basically a dual monitor setup with one monitor that doesn't take up a lot of desk real estate like two monitors would. But I mean, even with the clumsy setup and menu features, I like this monitor. It serves the purpose. I'm satisfied with it so far, and I give it 4 stars.